Hey YouTubers, I hope you're enjoying the content. Before we get to today's video, I want everyone to go hit that bell over by the subscriber button so you're notified every single time I upload. Enjoy the video. Hey YouTubers, and welcome back to another movie discussion video. Today we're going to be talking about the Dark Universe, Universal's Dark Universe that started this past weekend with The Mummy. And helping me record this video is someone very special to me, and I've been trying to get her on this podcast type situation for a really long time. We just never really found a discussion topic that we were willing to do with each other. But with that being said, we're gonna just go by calling her Candy Sue, because that's what she wants to be called.
It's not what I want, it's what I've been told for a while.
I've never used that on this, but yes, my lovely girlfriend has decided to share her opinion, because we rarely disagree. Oh, not rarely. We actually
disagree a lot.
We disagree a lot on movies. We have a different creative taste for the most part. So, with that being said, I wanted to take the first part of this video to explain. Just yesterday, we watched The Mummy. When we're recording this, I'm not necessarily sure when it's going up right now, but we just recently saw The Mummy, and we have a couple thoughts on the movie, and then maybe take the rest of the video to explain, like, what are they probably going to do with the rest of this universe, what are the next couple movies are going to be like, what they can do to basically right the ship, and what worked, what doesn't work, and yada yada yada. So, with that being said, what did you think of the movie? I mean, was it good, bad, boring?
It was underwhelming. I wanted more action, more kind of like a dark twist of plot. It was a very predictable movie, and like, I don't know, it was kind of boring.
Kind of boring? Well, to me, I thought it was going to be better, and I know I really shouldn't have thought that, because a lot of people going up to this were just basically saying, oh, it's going to be terrible, it's going to be terrible. And I don't know why I thought differently. I'm not even a huge fan of the Brendan Fraser films from, the last trilogy that they did.
I loved it! I absolutely loved it. It was funny, it was a little bit scary, and there was nice romance chemistry in it. Although in the third film they changed the woman, that was like total like downfall of that movie. But until the second movie, it was like really fun. Action was great. And the first two films was like super nice. Like, I loved it.
Oh yeah, okay. I understand like where people come from with that, and then obviously you have not only the Scorpion King, but all of the.
I love the Scorpion King. The Rock rocks.
But like they have like what, 5 of those straight to DVD, which are talk about extended universes and everything. Like, that's basically a universe if you count all those direct to DVDs and spin-off movies and everything that they did there.
Yeah.
But with this film, I don't know. I just kind of thought I was interested in it, not necessarily because the fact that I liked the Mummies previously. I don't think the Mummy is an entirely compelling character, in my opinion. Not in the Brendan Fraser movies, not even in the old Universal films that they made back in the day. I really think that it was interesting because of the fact that this was the start to something brand new and some kind of a shared movie cinematic universe that's not tied to any necessary canon or 60-year-old plot points that we know are going to come up sometime in the movie, because they're just so big or so iconic that so many people the internet over can basically come up and knows exactly how a plot point is going to play out this way or that way or anything else like that. And I thought that was something that was really interesting about these movies. But I understand I understand why people weren't necessarily excited for the plot.
I think the fact that they're making a universe out of these classical monsters are great, but I don't quite necessarily agree with the idea that the Mummy fits into this monster universe, because a lot of the monsters that, when you think about the classic Victorian monster, the Frankensteins, werewolves, vampires, Dorian Gray, all those characters are like classic, like, centered around European. Those are like European monsters. But when you think about like mummies, that's not a European monster. It's like a Egyptian monster. So if you're gonna bring like an international classic monsters, you're gonna have to bring out like classic Japanese folk tale monsters, like Chinese ones, like Indian gods and stuff like that. There's like tons of other like characters. Are they gonna bring those all in, or is this gonna be like limited to the European one and plus mummies? I mean, why do you have to put plus mummies in there?
I think when it comes down to it, and I could be completely wrong with this, but I think when it really comes down to it is a lot of these characters, the Mummy, Dracula, Frankenstein, and all these people are part of, like, are kind of free people to use. There's no really restrictions or copyright restrictions. They're basically public use when it comes to it. So anyone can make a Dracula film, anyone can make a Mummy film, and all this other stuff. I think the reason they did the Mummy and put it on here is kind of twofold. One, the Mummy was originally part of their original Universal Monster universe that they created back in like the 30s through the 60s or so. I can't remember the exact dates. So they're kind of obligated to put the Mummy in there. But when it comes to just more recently, or why they decided to use the Mummy as their flagship, was because, like we said earlier, there was that Brendan Fraser trilogy. So the Mummy is somewhat fresh on people's minds, and was a household name. People know that Universal makes good Mummy movies. But in my opinion, I think you're right. People have fond memories of those movies. They were funny. They were a little scary when we were kids. And
I think that backfired. Like, we already have like certain expectation because of the trilogy that was made before. We know what it's like. We know what they were supposed to look like. We know the basic plots. You know, the like, they're gonna, like, I don't know, some kind of queen's gonna come up, you know.
Mm-hmm.
That's always like the Mummy story. Like, they have a love interest, and they're gonna be like, oh, we're gonna rise to power, so we're gonna make a, like, deal with the demon, and then we're gonna rise up to power. Like, we know the classical, villain story already. And on top of that, we already had, well, I love the movies, and I know like a lot of people love the movies, so you had to top that. So they're actually putting additional pressure to do better than what they've made before, even with a similar storyline, which they did not accomplish here. So it actually backfired.
Mm-hmm. And I would say, like, even jumping off that a little, they struck a weird consistency tone when it came to how they were trying to portray this film. It was dark, and it had dark textures to it. Didn't necessarily have any vibrance to it outside of a certain amount of scenes.
It wasn't that dark.
But I'm talking more about like cinematography and the tones and textures that they used in order to actually, portray their imagery and all this other stuff that they did. And that, it was weird. It didn't necessarily mesh well with the humor they tried to stick in there. And there was a fair amount of it. I just feel like a lot of it felt flat when it wasn't directed, maybe at least in my opinion, when it wasn't directed through Jake Johnson's character. When Tom Cruise tried to make a joke or say something funny, it fell flat. I don't think he has I've never thought he had any type of comedic timing that worked.
He was just a Mission Impossible guy.
Yeah, like a guy who can survive getting thrown around cars and trains. And
the girl wasn't even that funny. I'm like, nobody was funny except for
Jake Johnson.
Yeah.
He was funny, and obviously, and to me, and like we'll definitely get into spoilers here, but as we look forward to the future, maybe a future sequel to this film, if it does well enough internationally, because it doesn't seem like it's going to do well domestically.
Well, the one thing I did like about the movie was the setup. Like, spoiler alert, there's Dr. Jekyll and Hyde isn't there, although he's very underwhelming in the film. But he's basically a person trying to combat evil and studies these other supernatural phenomenon, and tries to find a cure, quote unquote, or a way to combat evil, and like he does it in a museum, and he has a lot of resources. I don't know how he gets all the money. He has so much money. He has all these resources and people. Like he has a whole army. So he's basically like in the Marvel universe, Tony Stark. He has like all the resources and all the armies, and
he's S.H.I.E.L.D.
Oh, he's S.H.I.E.L.D. He's like kind of the Batman, like who gets everybody together, all the monsters together to battle the evil in the universe. So that was kind of cool, like to see like the resources he had and the museums he had and his ideology behind. Oh, we have to, he's like a scientist, so he's like, oh, there's this evil, but like if you come down to the science of it, there has to be a cure to either a curse, a disease, or virus, whatever, this chaotic event is happening. There has to be a cure to behind it, and my goal is to study these phenomenons, the evil, things that are going on, the chaotic things going on, and develop or think about a cure to help and balance this this thing in the world. And I thought that was cool.
To a degree, just jumping off that, which that's a good place to jump off and talk about the future of this particular universe or franchise in particular. This Prodigium, or whatever it's called, organization he has is probably one of the biggest talking points for a lot of people who saw the movie. And it's understandable in that regard, because one of the things that this actually does is it kind of stops the film a couple of times.
Yeah, it does.
It stops the film. It stops all of the momentum with the mummy story, or Tom Cruise's, I guess, relationship with the mummy, or his eventual, I guess, power struggle, or whatever happens, whatever really happens in this movie. But it stops that and everything about it to basically go like, oh, by the way, there's this much bigger universe and everything else is being set up in this movie, and it's not just a mummy movie. And the talk around, I guess, the internet is the fact that this is one of the weaker parts of the movie. And I agree with you. There are certain points in that movie where they're talking about Prodigium. They're showing, they walk through the lab and you get to see the severed hand of the creature of the Black Lagoon. You get to see the vampire skull. There's even we were talking about this the other day, or yesterday, I guess, but we were talking about there's a callback to the original trilogy with the Book of Life.
Book of Life or Book of Death, whatever that gold book was. Yeah, that was kind of neat.
That was cool. I mean,
although they didn't use the book, I was like, that's such.
Well, it's just an Easter egg, at least. But it does kind of indicate that, yeah, like maybe if they wanted to, they can kind of put Brendan Fraser back in there if they wanted to.
Save the world again.
But not that he'd probably come back at any time, and it was just for fun. But they had those things, and that stuff is interesting. And yeah, there's parts of it where Russell Crowe really steals the show because of his mysterious, interesting character. I kind of want to follow him more. But then there's this, Mr. Hyde thing.
When he shifted into Hyde, it was totally not good.
It was so boring. It was so boring because there was this situation where, they had alluded to it. They were hyping it up. He was really trying to hold it back. And it looked like, at least maybe they can change it in other films, but it looked like he wasn't transforming anymore. He wasn't turning into anything else, like any type of rage Hulk monster. Like
his eye color changed. That was the only thing that changed, and his skin tone just changed. That was only it.
But it wasn't threatening. It was way out of. It was like a tonal shift that was way out of place. That wasn't needed in that area. And I feel like at that point, and at least in my viewing experience, is where I started thinking, this movie really isn't going anywhere, is it?
No, yeah. That was very underwhelming transformation.
Yeah, and so...
And then he wasn't even that strong. He wasn't even that great. Tom Cruise was able to beat him.
Well, he was able to get an upper hand because there was the injection thing, which to me makes no sense. I mean... He has to put all these cylinders and inject himself, and it just he has to do it every 5 minutes. That's no way to live.
No, a couple hours.
No, they weren't. They were the way I know. Cinematic timing is one thing, but like literally, he injects himself. They go and they talk and they look at the mummy, and then they go back and he has to inject himself again. There's not like hours going on there.
I bet it's not. It's not time, but it's like a state of him. Like if he's aroused or heated up, or like the Hulk. Like Hulk like emerges when he's angry, something like that. When he's like stimulated, then he gets transformed, something like that. It's not necessarily timing.
So. But when I think of this, okay, going to the end, because I was thinking about this last night, and it bothered me at least a little bit. So throughout the movie, Princess Amenet, or the mummy character, is trying to, I guess,
resurrect the god of dead.
She's trying to resurrect the god of death, or Set, and use Tom Cruise as a vessel for that. So at the end of the movie, Tom Cruise decides that he's going to take the power in order to possess the possess the power among life and death or something, or for life and death. And what he does is he brings back the only two characters at that point who have died, and thus negating any type of tension or something that ever happened in the movie. Like literally, we're at square one, basically, besides Tom Cruise having this power, which is not necessarily explained, not necessarily shown. We don't know the extent of it, and everyone else is in, like, everything that happened to that movie. We literally start and end at the exact same place, with the exact same characters, with like nothing happening in between. And I think that is not like there's no real growth to anyone in this movie. It was just the whole film, as much as anyone in the creative team wants to sit around, and they are sitting around saying that they want these movies to be self-contained. They don't want them to be overly they don't want it to be cumbersome to take these movies and make them set up a bigger universe. That's exactly what this film did. It's the only point of having this film, is to set up the bigger universe.
But come on, it had to be able to stand on its own, like entertain by itself, but it wasn't even entertaining. Like, yeah, setting up is good, but you know, there has to be a little more than that. This film didn't do anything more than set up for future films.
And you know, when it comes down to the next ones, we have in 2019 they're doing The Bride of Frankenstein. And then they've talked about doing The Creature of the Black Lagoon. They're obviously doing The Invisible Man with Johnny Depp.
Yay!
And they have...
I like the werewolves.
Oh, they have...
I don't know who they're going to cast for the werewolf, but I'm going to expect some real hot dude.
The rumor is they're going to get Dwayne.
Lovely! I will love it.
But so they're trying to get a decent cast to do this. They have an interesting creative team. They have...
Okay, but like one of the major mistakes they made. Okay, it might be because we saw Wonder Woman like a couple hours before we saw the Mummies, like 12 hours before we saw the Mummies, and I was like riding on that, like, yeah, woman power, independent woman power, yeah. And then we saw this Mummy movie, and I was like, oh my god, women in this movie are nothing but crap. Like classical damsel in distress. Can't do anything without Tom Cruise. She's an archaeologist. She always needs Tom Cruise's help, and she can't do anything by herself. She's just like, I'm scared. What do I do? Go beat her up. And then there's the mummy, the Princess Amenet, who's like exactly the same. She has all these powers. She's like super powerful, you know, like half demonic powerful, like witch mummy, whatever. But he's like, I must resurrect the god of death in order to complete something. I'm like, no, you don't need anybody. You can just like take over the whole world. But like the whole goal of the movie was her to resurrect the god of death, and that was her whole motive. And I'm like, girl, you have the power. You can do whatever you want. But she became weak because she was so obsessed with bringing back the god of death. And the woman in the movie was so underwhelming.
You know what they could have done? I don't really want to go too far into, like, because we got the movie we got. They're not going to change it right now. But what they could have done when they were in the writing or filming process, they could have changed it to be... I realize Tom Cruise is your main character. You can still have him be your main character and your big draw point. but Princess Amenat could have chosen the girl.
I wanted to see a real badass girl fight, so I wanted the archaeologist to be like, oh, by the way, I'm a vampire or something like that, and then she would have like the one-on-one with the mummy, and that would have been the badass fight scene. But no, she had to just, you know, die, and Tom Cruise had to come save the day, you know, and Tom Cruise is like, I got all this demonic power, now the Princess Amenet is no match for me, and I'm like, oh my god, what like boring fights.
Mm-hmm.
Come on.
Very
and then we just saw Wonder Woman. I'm like, come on. We know women can kick ass.
I think
I'm a feminist.
You know what? I actually think I want to go off of that a little bit and talking about the future of this franchise, because it's interesting to me that they've set it up to a situation where they wanted a mummy movie with a female mummy being the main antagonist, and then they're doing Bride of Frankenstein next. I was actually thinking it would be interesting for this franchise to build a feminine with antagonizing forces, or
like a witch. Like that's what they did in Penny Dreadful, and it was pretty badass. I loved it.
Yeah, like just they can gender swap a lot of these like main, I guess, classical monster archetypes instead of being a man being a woman. And I'm not saying I'm not saying just do that. I mean, find stories and situations and characters that apply to it. Don't just gender swap, because that was one of the things that from The Mummy. There's a lot of problems with this production, but one of the main things is the reason they did a female mummy is because X-Men Apocalypse came out last year, and they thought it would be too
similar.
It would be too similar, because it's basically the same story, and he's just basically an ancient Egyptian that comes back and takes over the world and all the other like. So they,
except for he's not a mummy, but
well, I know, but that's the point. Like, it was a little too similar for them, so they changed it to a female. And the problem with that is, even though she's an interesting character, when you change it to a female, and then all she does is what she does through the movie is like tries to find a man.
Oh god, because we need so much men in our lives.
No, but like she tries to find this man. It's like, well, I understand the gender swap, but was it really worth it? I mean, did you really change things all that much? So if they can find a interesting balance and interesting stories to tell these greater, bigger stories with centered around some females and even males sometimes, but centered around strong characters of either sex, I think that would be pretty interesting. Personally, when it comes to a sequel for The Mummy, considering the fact that they've built it up for Tom Cruise to be all too powerful, I don't know. Yeah. I don't know what happens in a sequel to this if anyone ever comes, that you have a main character in Tom Cruise that is just too powerful to actually be taken on from anyone like The Mummy. Mm-hmm. I personally think that you give it over to Jake Johnson, as I told you yesterday.
Unless he turns evil, and the goal is to defeat Tom Cruise. So you're going to have to gather all these supernatural creatures. It's going to be the Avengers of universe, the dark universe. It's like, oh, the Tom Cruise gone crazy and chaotic. We need to defeat the god of death. And then so gather all these monsters. Only a monster can kill a monster. Da-da-da.
See, that's the thing, though. Like, what are you going to do? Like, okay, so...
Because he is the god of death, and that's, like, evil, ominous.
So, maybe, but... I mean, how are you going to set that up to the point where that actually happens? I mean, I like the concept. We do need like kind of an Avengers-like team-up movie.
Yeah.
That's probably where they're going.
Yeah.
And obviously at this point we don't have a whole lot of things, I guess, announced. They've talked about in the past that they're going to do, like I said, the Creature of the Black Lagoon, Bride of Frankenstein, some kind of a Frankenstein, but I mean, Frankenstein's going to be in Bride of the Frankenstein. Invisible Man. They're talking about Dracula. As you know, remember they had Dracula Untold was the start of this universe, and then they retconned that.
Oh.
And it's no longer part of the universe, so they're going to have to redo a Dracula movie.
Well, that was like a really, really long time ago. Oh, yeah.
It was 2014.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember when, you wanted to see that, and I went to go see it, and it's like, no, it wasn't good. So
I thought it was alright. Yeah.
But it was interesting. It was like, it would have been interesting to have Luke Evans as Dracula, but I can understand that they wanted to have a little bit more consistent tone. And they've also talked about doing Phantom of the Opera and The Hunchback of Notre Dame, which is weird to me because, like, how are those people?
They're European.
Well, like, how
creatures.
are they interesting though? I mean,
well, Phantom of the Opera, he's super smart. He's like a mechanic, so he's like a super smart mechanic who, you know, is a little bit psycho.
He's their
good.
tech. He's their tech
yeah. He
guy.
could be the tech guy, and then Notre Dame. He's what's his? He's kind of a techie guy too.
Well, he's religious.
Yeah, I mean, what is religious gonna do?
Well, like, he has gargoyles. I know he has gargoyles.
Oh yeah, that's true.
So maybe gargoyles. Maybe he has. The thing is like, I understand that they're building up to this, but some of the things that movies that they've announced to me are just weird. I don't necessarily know how or why they're going to play into the broader picture, other than the fact that, oh, we all just exist in the same universe, so that's fine. And that's the thing.
Van Helsing is gonna come.
See, Van Helsing, to me, it would be cool. Like, I like the idea that Tom Cruise could possibly be an antagonizing force in some of the other films. But to me, one of the things I want is a Van Helsing versus all the monsters movies.
Oh.
Because he's...
Okay, Van Helsing is just a human. He's gonna die. Come on. Unless Tom Cruise becomes like a Van Helsing, like he's like the god of death, and he's like the Van Helsing, and he hunts down all the monsters.
Well, that's what they were saying. Like, one of the rumors was that, and it's not confirmed or denied right now, but that was one of the things, is like Tom Cruise is going to become Van Helsing after all is said and done, after The Mummy.
I can see that. He's too serious and he's not funny. And Van Helsing character is kind of not funny and serious, so I can totally see that happening.
I feel like the one thing this franchise needs, like any of these films, they could be dark, they can be this tonal darkness and everything. One of the things, they need to strike a tone or a consistent tone. One of the problems that The Mummy had, and I think one of the things that they've been talking about a lot, is the fact that they have these dark, gritty movies that are part horror film, part action blockbuster. And I think that's the thing they tried to hit in The Mummy, but everything felt flat because they tried to do too much. They were building an extended universe, alongside trying to make it scary, alongside trying to make it an action film, like a summer tentpole film. And also they tried to add some humor in there that also fell flat. So, which one of those things, like, something has to go.
You can't take out action. Like, this is an action thing. You can kind of take out the horror aspect of it, but horror will come naturally from these monsters because they're, you know, horror genre monsters. So don't try to make it too scary because it has to come naturally through these monsters. But I guess you can take the humor out, but I always like a little bit of humor once in a while. I think that makes a movie really great.
I agree with that, but honestly, because these are something they're building, at least for the foreseeable future, I don't necessarily know whether this extended universe is going to continue or whether or not it's going to actually even be good going forward.
They invested so much in it already. They got it. They got to do it.
They'll I can promise you they're going to do Bride of Frankenstein, The Invisible Man.
Yeah.
But if they can't turn it around after those, they might pan it. You know, at some point these things become...
That's such a shame because these characters they're classic characters. Like, come on.
Yeah, I also feel it's a shame. I think it could lead to something pretty cool. They just have to, like I said, they have to hit a right tonal structure. And the thing is, I would take out the horror aspect. I don't think it's necessary. In fact, one of the things that they really, to me, they tried so hard to make this film scary, and it just wasn't. I mean, I don't remember a scene that felt like it was legitimately trying to scare me, other than just trying to get me to jump. one way or the other?
Well, I'm slightly biased because I can't do a scary movie very well. The mummy kind of resurrecting part was a little bit scary for me, but I get scared off of like a lot of really silly things. So, yeah.
I think you need the humor. I really think you need the humor, and
you need the action.
You need the action, and actually that was weird to me because I want there to be action the same way that, Marvel has action and all this other stuff that has action. But at the same time, it needs to be to scale. Because in this movie, she goes and she blows up like an entire city.
Well, she doesn't blow it up, but she creates like this giant sandstorm. And then she gets her ass kicked by Tom Cruise. And I'm like, that's really not to scale. Like, she can literally tear down a city. And she's struggling with Tom Cruise.
Mm-hmm. Well, and they fought, like, it's weird because, yeah, you're blowing up a city, and then we're fighting in a old sewer tunnel tomb place that's covered in water and everything, and it just didn't feel like a climactic fight.
No.
To end the movie on, and I feel like you have to take your characters in stride, and that was the weird thing about doing The Mummy first is. The Mummy has always been, at least back in the Brendan Fraser days, it's been kind of a destroy the world type of chaotic event. But when you think about other individuals, other people, and like, I'm not going to see Bride of Frankenstein as destroying an entire city. I'm not going to see even Dracula, for the most part, as destroying an entire city, or the Creature of the Black Lagoon as destroying an entire city. So what are they I don't mind the action, but it has to be to scale. It has to be a decent amount of it, and I think that's where they're actually having the hardest problem. Is they want to make these big $100 million+ tentpole films. They want to spend a ton on marketing and all this other stuff, but why? Can these characters really create? They're scary. They're supposed to be scary, but scary is not leveling a city. Scary, like, that's tentpole, that's action movie, that's popcorn flick.
That's why this can't be. This has to be some kind of Avenger thing, because these individually these characters don't care about saving the world or destroying the world, but they do have a tremendous power. So what? Like, there's gonna have to be a string that ties all these characters together to work together or do something together to care about the world. Mm-hmm. So yeah, the Mummy kind of creates this vast power that has possibly the power to destroy the world, whereas these individual cool monsters don't really care about the world, but they do have this tremendous power. So setting it up kind of that way is, I think, good. I think that was the purpose of it.
Yeah, and the thing, like, the one thing I'd say is when it comes to that's why this movie strikes such a weird tone. It's juggling so much.
It is juggling a lot.
And when we get to Bride of Frankenstein in a couple years, it'll be interesting to see how they, I guess, take the lessons from this movie and move forward with the idea that maybe we don't have to, if this movie doesn't have to juggle not only building way too much of a universe that it's not ready for, but also not having to destroy or do these big action set pieces, because of just the tone and structure of the character itself doesn't really lend itself to any of that stuff, then maybe you take those two away and maybe even dial down the horror, and you have more of a character-centric focused film, and you start building off of that. And I think that's what you really need to do. If they're going to do these movies, then they're going to need to have to create characters that we like and care for, even if they are the bad guy. I mean, the big problem with this is, with all of this stuff doing, like, creating the broader universe with the organization, introducing Tom Cruise, giving Tom Cruise his power, trying to be funny, trying to do these big action set pieces, be dark and be scary, and all this other stuff. We have a movie called The Mummy that has basically nothing to do with the mummy.
Yeah.
And no indication of whether she'll come. I guess she'll come back. She has to come back.
Well, yeah. One thing about these European monsters are that they're not. They're neither evil nor good. Like if you look at Jekyll and Hyde, and he has both sides. One's a upstanding citizen doctor, and one's a chaotic monster. And then you have this invisible man who was a normal man who was a scientist, and then he made himself invisible, and then he's still a normal guy, and then it kind of makes him crazy time to time because he's invisible, but that's fine. And then you have Dracula, who he doesn't want to end the world. It's just he's a Dracula. He happens to not like sun and drink blood. That's what he does, but he doesn't want to kill people.
Oh, he wants to kill people.
Well, he wants to kill bad people. Well, depending on what kind of movie it is.
Depending on
vampire can go either way. There's decent vampires that there's underworld where it's humans are food, but we don't kill them for no reason. It's kind of that deal. That kind of seems to be the way that vampire movies are kind of going. There's also the werewolf where the human side is nice and buffy and cute and hot, and then there's they turn into a wolf and they become a little bit chaotic and strong and primal, whatever, but they're not evil. All of these characters, if you take a look at them, they're not really that evil. They're just kind of human. They have their downside, but they have their upside too. Mm-hmm. They're not a universal evil spirit. No.
They're monsters.
They're neutral. They're just like human beings. They have good days and bad days.
Yeah, and
Frankenstein. Look at Frankenstein. Oh my god, his dad was an asshole. Created him from corpses and then left him to die. And then Frankenstein's what am I supposed to do? I'm just a strong little, kind of ugly guy, and I just want a bride. I just want a girlfriend. He's what? He's an innocent child.
That's the cool thing about Bride of Frankenstein. If anyone's ever seen the original. It's she's not even in the movie. She's in the movie for 10 minutes.
No. And
they talk about her and all this other stuff. They bring her back, and in the movie she rejects him, and then he blows up the mansion.
Yeah, he's a sad guy. But none of them are evil. No, they have their problems, but they're trying to work on their problem.
Mm-hmm. And that's I think really what they need to do. And it's weird to me that a lot of people are writing this universe off already just because The Mummy wasn't good. And like I said earlier, it's the Alex Kurtzman and Chris Morgan. At least their filmographies are not, they're not classic. They're not even all that good. With Alex Kurtzman doing the Transformers movies, the early Transformers movies, and then Star Trek and Star Trek Into Darkness being his biggest ones, and then Chris Morgan doing basically all of the Fast and Furious movies.
Yay!
But so they're the people trying to build this. I have faith in Chris Morgan. I think he makes some really fun films. He knows how to strike a balance.
Okay.
I don't really care much for Alex Kurtzman, and he's the one who directed The Mummy, not his directorial debut, but his biggest film to date. And I think that we're all writing the movies off a little too soon. But with that being said, they definitely have a lot of problems that they need to learn from this film. And I think Universal, like you said, have spent a lot of money on this franchise already. They want this to work, and they are going to give it another film or two, considering the fact that they have it already lined up. They have the cast, they have the creative teams, they've already spent millions on script and all this other stuff. So they're going to keep working at it. And I would be very, very surprised if this weekend's reaction to The Mummy doesn't have them already thinking of how they're going to push forward and change all of the mistakes they made.
Yeah, they're going to change some stuff. I won't lose my hope just yet out of one film, but I will try to take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah. I mean, it's weird. I guess the last thing I want to say is it's weird. We're in a interesting time in, I guess, Hollywood or U.S. filmmaking, where because Marvel basically struck oil.
I always love supernatural things before even Marvel struck whatever.
No, but my point is they struck oil with the whole cinematic universe idea, and to date, they're the only ones who've actually been able to do it well.
Well, DC's trying to do it.
Well, DC's trying to do it, but DC's not necessarily doing it well. And then now, later this month, we're going to get the 5th installment in the Transformers series, which is supposed to kick off a new universe.
I think that's going to be pretty good.
Hasbro.
I'm hopeful for it.
And then we also got King Kong, which is supposed to kick off a universe.
I don't know how I feel about that.
Well, King Kong was a good movie.
It was a good movie, but I don't want him to fight Godzilla.
And then we also, just all the other ones that people want cinematic universes for. So we're in a very strange time, and
why does everybody want cinematic universe?
Because it obligates people to see movies they would rather not see because they don't want to miss ideas or concepts that are going to going to be brought up in a movie that they actually want to see.
I'm already getting lost between DC and Marvel. Like I think like they're one of the same universe, and you keep telling me no, that's Marvel. That's DC. I'm like, I'm already getting confused. like with this dark universal dark universe, it's gonna get me even more confused. And I'm like, oh, what about this? And you're gonna be like, that's Marvel. Stop mixing the universes. And I'm like, oh, but it's a big giant world.
So, with that being said, at least in my opinion, it's a cool concept. This franchise, this cinematic universe is a cool concept. But the problem with it is that with everyone trying to jump in the same pool at once, some things are going to have to fail. And if they don't learn the lessons that they should have learned from this movie, I think this one could probably be one of the ones that is going to fail.
Pick and choose wisely.
We don't have money or time for every one of them, I'm sure. So, with that being said, guys, I hope everyone enjoyed the video. I know it ran a little long, but hey, sometimes they do, and we like just talking about things for a while. But anyway, guys, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Do not forget to hit that bell over by the subscriber button so you're notified every single time that I upload. Sometimes I upload pretty inconsistently, but not always. And I hope you enjoyed the video.
Bye!